So what have we learned? What are the lessons that come from the tens of thousands of pages of information that we've generated on these lives? Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder and harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this.
Fuel Training Montage.
Good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period. We've learned three big lessons about relationships. The first is that social connections are really good for us, and that loneliness kills. Turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier, and they live longer than people who are less well. And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. People who are more isolated than they want to be from others find that they are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely. And the sad fact is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 think that they're lonely. We know that you can be lonely in a crowd and you can be lonely in a marriage. So the second big lesson that we learned is that it's not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether or not you're in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of your close relationships that matters. It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really bad for our health. It turned out to be very bad for our health, perhaps worse.
Good close relationships are good for our health.
Strangest thing. Tried getting back into Grey Hack here so that you could complete some objectives, getting some levels, and this is what I get. Guess there must be some kind of a bug or something. I have tried deleting my profile, and it didn't seem to help. So, looks like no Grey Hack today. Let's see what we got here for updates. Was this August 24th? Is that what we're seeing? August 24th, major update. What, does not show version. Oh, that's right. It was in a corner. Oh, come on. Okay, yeah, we're on 84462. Last major patch notes. I do see 84462, the version that we're on. That was August 26th. August 24th was a major update, looks like. And what do we get? Okay, network layer rework. Network layer has been completely replaced by a new system improving overall stability in multiplayer, as well as fixing various issues that could arise when using slower and unstable connections, like some Wi-Fi connections. In addition to these changes, certain improvements in the scripting system facilitating inclusion of developments. Okay. Ooh, I like the look of that. I like the look of that a lot. The first iteration of the economy is completed. Several important changes to different aspects of the game, along with the inclusion of the blockchain service for players to create their own cryptocurrencies. That I'm not really looking forward to dabbling in that. I'm not planning on creating my own, but I am really interested to see how it works. Because my first minor foray into multiplayer, one of the things that fascinated me the most was the player base and how it seemed to be a kind of microcosm, as MMO player bases tend to be. But that's the kind of thing that really interests me. So let's poke around at that when we get a chance. ISP. ISPs have been introduced, allowing the player to rent their own network. This includes the possibility of being able to connect from your own computer to your own network through the network cable instead of Wi-Fi. Okay. Summary. Replaced economy revamp, added auto script execution in players' computers when the system boots. Ooh, you can have startup scripts now. Nice. Added new scripting objects, service blockchain, coin wallet, subwallet. Yep. Improvements in the manual and the tutorial. Ooh, let's check that out. And let's get the good desktop back here. Let's check those out. Holy moly, yeah, this is a change. Ooh. All right, let's check scripting out first. Okay. Let's get to the new stuff after we look at the old stuff. Looks like more of a reorganization than anything to this. Not seeing anything jumps out of me here as being brand new. Pretty sure that was all there. Router commands. Yep. I think this, I don't remember seeing the router in the help before, so that might be new or expanded or reorganized. Where is... Okay. I mean, I like the reorganization. Let's see if the search is working. It wasn't working when we were looking for something before. What was that something? What was the something we were looking for? Was it? No, it wasn't ifconfig. It was a cat. It was something really simple. Ellis? It was something really simple. It might have been one of those. I don't rightly recall, but all three of those worked, so that's good. That's just the scripting section, by the way. So let's take a look at some of the new stuff. That's not it. Coin. Subwallet. Get address. Get mined coins. It's good. It's good. I like this. I like this. Let's go back. This back button moves places, by the way, if you're lost. Admin monitor must be okay. That is new. I don't remember seeing that in the guide before. This visual programs with this warning here, that's a good addition. That will, I didn't find that particularly confusing when I was playing before, but it's good that it's there. All right, cool. Terminal programs, basic commands. This is what I was looking for before. Oh, does that mean that it actually searched? Yes, it did. So it searches across the entire manual instead of just the section that you're in, which I actually think is good. Touch, who am I? Was it sudo we were looking for? It was something simple. It might have been that. Yeah. Yeah, good. Server installers, network commands, permissions, and users. Oh, security. Cipher, scan lib, scan router. This is a good change. All of the things I'm seeing here are a much better, more accessible manual. This is way better than the last version. First step, save game, avoid traces. This is way better organization. I don't know if it's the best it could be, but it's totally better. And general tips, which previously, if you really wanted to get that for Greyhack, you really had to go and look at guides that were online. Looks like they're in here. Sorry, they're in here now. So hacking a network without any open ports, doing the reverse shell, CCTV cameras, which I don't even think I've had a chance to even play with yet. How to avoid being hacked by other players. It's good. There's no single infallible method to achieve this. Since we're gonna come back to this because I think maybe that will be our first objective, is to try and follow these directions. But before we do that, I am not done poking. Looks like we are back to like the regular old default starter configuration. Okay. Server rules. That didn't pop up for us. It popped up right away. It might actually have been there and I might have clicked off of it now that I think of it. But I do remember these were right up in my face when I first started multiplayer last time. But they're still there. They just didn't pop up. And if they did, I didn't notice. Migrated the chat. Sorry, let's see what else we got in the patch notes here. Removed starter money when registering a bank account, implemented coupons when starting a new game that can be exchanged for hack shop programs and exploits. Ooh, that's cute. That's cool. We don't have that set up yet, so we'll get there. Added new service object, the scripting system, which can be obtained by importing. Yep, gotcha. Migrated chat, SSH, FTP, R shell, and so on from shops to scripting, as well as the binaries to start and stop the service. You can call the launch method exclusively without limitation on the number of calls. Nested call launches are still limited to a maximum of 15. Okay. The speed of the hard disk can affect the connection speed, which can cause bottlenecks. Make sure you have a fast hard drive if you also have a fast connection. Well, added GPUs used for mining cryptocurrencies. Okay. So the speed of the hard disk can affect the connection speed, which can cause bottlenecks. I don't know how I feel about that, to be perfectly honest with you. So, the very premise of this is not necessarily completely without merit, right? In an abstract sort of sense. So, in a sense, the speed of any component in a computer system could potentially be a source of bottlenecks, only in so much as all components work in tandem to complete certain objectives and execute certain instructions within a computer system. So, for example, let's say, first of all, at a very low level, a computer system will essentially have different components to handle different parts of processing. The CPU is in charge of executing instructions. Those instructions sit in registers. The instructions in those registers are executed via, so if you recall the whole Spectre and Meltdown thing a couple of years ago, that vulnerability was based on CPUs essentially shortcutting things in order to achieve greater speeds. So there's a couple of ways that you can achieve. Hold on a moment. Let me take these goddamn headphones off. All right, so CPUs can increase their speed heretofore since their development in the late 70s and 80s and so on, achieve greater speeds at first by reducing the actual distance, the physical distance that the electrons, the paths that they must travel in order to essentially, create binary code to execute those instructions. At a certain point around the mid 90s, a point of diminishing returns is reached in which we cannot yet really make them much smaller than they already are. There have been improvements since the 90s, don't get me wrong, in terms of processor size and thus increased speed. But other than reducing their size, adding other efficiencies with the pathing and the logical architecture and so on are just some of the ways that we can make them faster. However, when we reach that point of diminishing returns, chip manufacturers needed to find other ways essentially to cut the processing overhead. Let's call it labor overhead for these processors. And so what they did is they developed something known as speculative processing, wherein instructions were not necessarily executed in sequential order as they were loaded into those registers, right? So registers you can think of as an on-deck sort of holding pattern for instructions as the CPU is executing, with earlier processors one at a time, and now with more modern processors possibly several at a time. But speculative processing essentially would go through those registers and do some pre-processing on them to get a guesstimation of the amount of time it would take. And I say guesstimation, I'm being hyperbolic here, but you know, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know that my language tends to be imprecise and I use hyperbole constantly. So please don't take everything I say quite literally, but just follow me here. So in order to get an estimated amount of time it will take to actually execute the command, it will execute it in part and get some kind of an idea of how long it will take. That speculative processing. And the Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities essentially were a way to use speculative processing to get feedback on instructions before they were even executed. Now, when those were patched, of course, that means that speculative processing had to be patched, which means that everything slowed down, which is why there was a fairly serious, in some cases, performance hit with the patching of that vulnerability. Now, when those instructions in the register, as they're being waiting to be executed, they're not necessarily going to stay there. If for some reason those instructions need to be swapped out, or in the event that there are instructions that have yet to be loaded, it's going to have to go somewhere, and it goes into lower level caches. At the same time, there needs to be a place to work as larger. Registers are very, very small. They hold an incredibly small amount of data, just the instructions for processing. But the things that are being processed need to go somewhere too. And in order to hold on to larger amounts of memory, which are slower to access but have a greater volume, there are other tiers of memory as well. So as a CPU will have various different levels of caches, the computer system as a whole has various different levels of memory as well. So you've got the active register, your L2, L3, and so on in the CPU, and anything that isn't part of an instruction but might be referenced by an instruction, let's say a computation between let's say we want to add two figures. Okay, so the instruction for adding two figures will say something like add this register, or this register location. Let's say, instead of using registers, I don't want to get too in the weeds here. Let's say this address and this address, and those addresses are memory addresses where values are being stored. So if we want to add 2 and 3, let's say that we have an address that's R1 that has the value of 2, and we have an address that's R2. That's going to get confusing because now I'm using numbers. We have an address A that contains the value of 2 and an address B that contains the value of 3. The instruction that the CPU will receive will simply be add A and B. But the value of A and B need to be stored somewhere, and that is what we call primary memory, or the functional memory, or RAM in a computer. Those addresses reside in that space. It's not meant for long-term storage. It's meant for short-term storage, but short-term in this case can mean essentially as long as it needs to be held by the active application or by the running application, because these addresses are reserved in the run space of that application at runtime, as long as it needs it, right? But it's not meant to be persistent, which means if power is cut to the system, those values will be gone very, very shortly. And the amount of time it's held after power is cut depends on a lot of different factors, but isn't really important for this anyway. Now, the primary memory of the computer system can also get full. right? If you are on a computer system right now that has a very finite amount of available primary physical memory, then you probably know what it's like when you start to run short of that. You can run into what's known as resource drought. But modern computer systems have a way around that too. It will, instead of just using primary memory to hold these values, it will also push some of it to secondary memory. Secondary memory is persistent long-term storage, which you probably know as your SSD or your HDD or whatever. The stuff that's in primary memory will get put into secondary memory if it's like, I don't really need this right now, but there is an application running that probably will want this at some point. But since I don't need it right now, I'm going to put it over in secondary memory and hold on to it until I'm ready for it. Now, you have your primary memory, that's primary physical memory, and then you have secondary memory, and then that process of primary memory putting things temporarily into secondary memory is known as paging, and that's done with a page file, which is essentially virtual primary memory. That's a page file that sits, if you're on a Windows system, probably in the root of your OS drive, and it's pagefile.sys. This is all important forensic stuff too, because sometimes important information ends up in that space. In addition, so you've got just counting down where we've gone. You've got your CPU, you've got your primary registers, you've got your lower level caches, then you've got primary memory, physical, then you've got your virtual memory, primary memory, which sits on secondary memory, and you've got your secondary memory, which holds all of your files and all of the other stuff that you actually interact with in your computer system, including your operating system. Okay, so those are three completely different components. But if there is a problem anywhere with those components, let's say you don't have enough primary memory and you're running into that resource drought issue. Well, what will happen is that your computer system will be paging a lot. And paging, again, is when it swaps information from physical memory to virtual memory. But because it's accessing secondary memory, your hard disk, there will be a limit on the amount of paging it can do before it starts to bottleneck and slow down. So if you have small amount of physical memory and a slow hard drive, that will slow your computer system down in what is known as page thrashing, right? So in that case, those components will affect one another because the process requires all three of those components to essentially operate. It's like a race condition, right? These things need to happen in order for other things to continue, and so there's a delay if there is any part of the process which is slower, and that's a bottleneck because one thing can't move until the other thing moves, and the other thing is slow. Now, when it comes to networking interfaces and these components, it actually tends to be less of a problem. Generally speaking, if you have a slow connection issue, it's not going to be the result of any of the physical components in your system, not because it can't be, but because generally speaking, when we're talking about the speeds of transmissions over modern communication networks, even when we're talking fiber optics, it tends to not be a problem for even average systems to keep pretty good pace with those. So is it impossible that having a connection can be too fast for a computer? No, it's not impossible. Theoretically speaking, for example, if you download a file from the internet, what happens is it will make a request for that file from the remote server. It will transfer it over generally in parts, known as prefetch files, and also parts in terms of packets, whatever protocols being used. But then it will save those prefetch files to disk, secondary memory, passing through primary memory on the way, of course. And then it will reassemble them into secondary memory, again, passing through primary memory, of course, into a whole file referenced by the file system, and everything's all well and good. If the hard disk is so slow that it can't process what we call I/O, input-output, if the I/O is pinned, then you run into I/O thrashing, just as you can have page thrashing, and that will result in essentially the network will have this data piling up, and it will sit there and wait in a holding pattern until it's processed and everything's good. But like I said, not usually a problem with modern computer systems. Usually if there's a bottleneck, if the network is running slow, has nothing to do with any of the physical components in the machine and everything to do with some issue in networking. And that's because the network itself has so many components that generally operate at completely different expectations in terms of their service and all of this kind of stuff. And to say nothing of all the quality of service issues that there are with the modern centralized internet, but I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that as much as I want to. Okay, so unless this note is pertaining specifically, it doesn't say it's pertaining specifically to coin mining, but coin mining is a horse of a different color that doesn't rely on, no, because it does say hard disk. It does mention some things in addition to that in the notes about dedicated GPUs for coin mining and added, okay, and then the last thing, added a social engineering option for outdated library found for an administrator to update a library on a network. Okay. Good changes, it seems, overall. Let me double check here the 8.4462A update. See if anything important got changed recently. Fixed regression bug that prevented the price of coins from being updated. All right, fixed regression bug prevented changing the background color of the terminal. Oh, we can do that now? Do we have to do it through the command line? We can't. There's no GUI interface. Okay. Fixed bug in config-land that allowed the use of local IP of the player in a newly added device, and so on. Okay. All right. We'll come back to the terminal then. Let's see. A commenter mentioned the chat. Choose a nickname. This is definitive. You cannot change this name even with a new machine. Can I do underscores here? No? Okay, that's fine. I will use my my name here in chat. Just because. Damn it. Am I over by one again? Damn it. It's a conspiracy against me. Okay. So I heard there's a general chat and so on. Register a channel as a guild. No, don't want to do that. Address unknown. Hey, there's some people here. Cool. I don't have time to chat though. So we got works we got to do. And those works are to follow the manual. All right, there's no single infallible method to achieve. Let's go through this and see how it stacks up against our some real world advice here. There is no single infallible method to achieve this, since to obtain good security, you have to know the system well and apply different methods depending on the libraries that are installed on your system, as well as any services running, such as SSH or HTTP. It is usually a trial and error process until you find the right security on your system, although there are some basic tips you can use to avoid being hacked when you start the game. Okay. I'm not going to read too much into the preamble here. It's avoid registering your account, mail, and bank in the first results of the browser. When you connect to a website, your IP address is recorded in the server logs. Anyone who accesses these logs can see what connections have been made and therefore can reach you. Since the first results are the ones that hackers usually review, it is advisable to register on any page that is not among the first results. Okay. That, I mean, that's not sound real world advice. The real world analog of this would be, you should bank with an unknown bank because, of course, Capital One, wait, that's not a bank. That's a credit card company. Bank of America. There we go. And Associated Bank, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, or whatever. These are all well-known brands, and they're more likely to be attacked. which is, hey, that's not wrong. I mean, they are bigger fish, and so they draw more attention. Typically speaking, when we're talking about cyber criminals and their methodology, and I'm not going to go off on too long of a tangent here. It's just that this is my area, so I'm interested in it. But generally, with criminals and determining their motives, most other types of crimes of a similar nature to most active cyber crimes have a very easy motive. Generally speaking, profit. And when I say okay, I don't want to get into like specific criminology stuff here because this will be hours of me just talking. So instead, let's say that if you were to encounter most crimes, let's just say most crimes here, outside of those that are crimes in defense of the self or crimes of passion or interpersonal crimes, most of them are going to be a clear motive, profit. Usually, generally speaking, is going to be profit. With cyber criminals, profit is a main motivator, but more than other offenders, cyber criminals are likely to be motivated by things that are intrinsically valuable. So when something is extrinsically valuable, someone is victimized because they have something that is universally recognized as being valuable, like jewelry, electronics, money, this kind of thing. Anything that can be easily sold because it is sought after and known to be valuable. Those are extrinsically valuable things, and extrinsically valuable things will naturally draw the attention of motivated offenders. So your Wells Fargo, your Bank of America, and all of that, they are big targets because they know they have a lot of money. They're big fish. However, cyber criminals are more likely than other offender types to be motivated by intrinsically valuable things like challenge, respect, revenge, these kinds of things. And so Wells Fargo is more likely to be targeted because they have more money, but they're also more likely to be targeted because they're bigger and draw more attention and are seen as a more attractive target. We call them uniquely attractive targets. They are uniquely attractive for the various qualities of that victim. So yes, I would say that that banking with a large bank probably does expose you to more cyber risk, but those organizations also have more resources to combat cybercrime. If you were to bank with a smaller, like say like a community credit union or something like that, they're less likely to be targeted because there's less attention on them, but they're also less likely to have good security. And I speak somewhat from experience here. I've done security for smaller firms and larger firms. And I can tell you that the even customer-facing cybersecurity measures for larger banks tend to be more robust than they are for smaller banks with fewer resources. That said, is one necessarily better than the other? I don't think that people should make their decisions in this sense based on that, because large banks, even though they have more resources, doesn't mean that they're using them correctly, and these things need to be maintained, right? We live in a universe in a constant state of entropy. Everything is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. And without constant vigilance from cybersecurity professionals, even the best laid plans of mice and men will go awry. Smaller town banks being a less attractive target and having fewer resources doesn't mean that they're worse, because again, the right person in the right place can make a tremendous amount of difference, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity. And one person doing cybersecurity who knows what they're doing at a small town credit union type bank can really secure that mamma jamma. They really can. It's possible. Of course, as this advice points out, it is true. There is no such thing as being bulletproof in cybersecurity. There's a motivated offender has the upper hand. They just do. They just have the advantage. The most that we can do in cybersecurity on the blue team side is we try to lower the return on investment for cyber attackers. So cyber attacks require a certain amount of effort, and someone who is determined enough and willing to expend enough resources is almost impossible to keep out. But we can make it very, very expensive to the point where it's not worth their time and effort to do so, and to deter just about most offenders, except for the most motivated offenders. So anyway, got on this tangent because while this is good advice for the game, it doesn't necessarily translate directly to the real world. Change Wi-Fi after visiting certain websites. If you suspect that your IP could be discovered when accessing a system, it is recommended to connect to another Wi-Fi network so that when an attacker reaches the public IP network, you will no longer be there. I did connect to the gift Wi-Fi network for now. Probably not going to be showing that in the future. I'm going to keep that hidden. It's already one of the things I was thinking of anyway. So I've got my own ideas as far as how to be safe. I did get a message from a commenter, Remedy. Thank you for your concern about being secured. I plan to try to be. It's another one of the reasons why I'm doing an edited video instead of just a live record and throw it up on YouTube type video, so that I can at least have a second shot at doing a sanity check on some of the stuff I'm bound to get up to. Going to do something stupid sooner or later, but as far as my setup here, I'm doing my best, right? Learn to manage the permissions of your file system. So the default permissions configured in your operating system may not be enough to maintain your security. It's a good idea to restrict these permissions as much as possible. But of course, without locking yourself out of a system, take a look at the chmod, chown commands to learn more about modifying permissions. That's it. That's the 3 pieces of advice. How does change your Wi-Fi after visiting certain websites stack up? Well, the real world analog of what they're talking about here is using a VPN. The whole point of using a VPN is that when you make web requests, it obfuscates the origin of those requests by filtering them through a proxy intermediary who makes those requests on your behalf. And that proxy intermediary takes care, or should take care, of all of the security of that connection and not keeping any logs to ensure anonymity and so on. This is incorrect advice, but connecting to other Wi-Fi networks in this case would be the analog of connecting to like my neighbor's Wi-Fi in my neighborhood or my apartment building or something like that, right? Which it's not hard to crack most wireless passwords, but also it doesn't really get us what we're after, because we're not really adding anything in terms of security as much. It does obfuscate the network we're connected to, but in terms of our exposure, it's about the same. The only difference is that I'm connecting to somebody else's networking equipment, which I don't control, and I don't know what the security is like, and so on and so forth. Hopping from network to network is one way to sort of hide what you're doing from the administrators of those systems, but it's not like they generally know anyway. But everybody in a neighborhood, let's say you're in an apartment building and there's 10 SSIDs broadcasting, probably all have the same ISP. Super easy to figure out who's hopping from network to network. Like you're not actually doing anything by hopping on somebody else's Wi-Fi, except using somebody else's Wi-Fi, and to a certain extent, at least to the sites you're connecting to, maybe offering some confusion because it's a different public IP, same MAC address and everything. But if law enforcement were at all attempting to ascertain who is this person that could be connecting to these things, you're not offering any resistance whatsoever. This will do nothing to hide your identity. Guaranteed. And learning to manage the permissions on your file system, is super, super important. There's a couple of other things that don't seem to be available or aren't mentioned here that we could also do in order to protect ourselves. Assuming that this Wi-Fi change thing is supposed to be an in-game analog to VPN, we'll take that for granted. We're not. If I were to, I'm gonna go ahead and do this here because it's gonna change anyway. So yeah, we don't have, there's no in-game analog for maybe it's in, nope, no, not this. No, it doesn't seem to be. Okay, yeah, there's no physical address or anything here on our networking card, so there's no analog for that. But we could use Mac Scrambler, Mac changers. There's no encryption. We could have partial disk encryption for our most sensitive files. There is encryption in the game, oddly enough, but there is no full or partial disk encryption. It would be really great to have encrypted containers, an in-game analog of, I guess, Veracrypt or something in this case. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there we could do. There's no, we could use a password vault with a really strong master password. There's no, let's see, what else? There's no multi-factor authentication. That would be a good one too. Although I don't know how the game would implement that without, creating a mobile app to act as the hardware token on a smartphone. It would otherwise have to be a soft token, and that's basically next to useless anyway. Let's see, what else? What else could we do here? I said partial disk encryption, full disk encryption, multi-factor, Mac scramblers, VPN. There's a bunch of things here I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, of course. We have a firewall in game, which I can't enable, but a host-based firewall, host-based IDS or IPS even. Content filters, like if I could set up like a squid or something, that would be awesome. We could do local DNS black holing for known. Let's say that there's like someone, I don't even know if this is possible, but let's say someone manages to write some malware and distribute it in the game, of course, in the game, only affecting the game. But if those like IOCs were published and we knew that there was a site or certain CNC servers or something, if we could have even a local squid and do some local DNS black holing with that, that would be another measure we could take. What else? Application control policies. We don't have those available to us. That would be a good way in concert with the encryption in order to secure a system. I mean, imagine if you had application control policies and you could tighten them down at will to essentially disable, decipher, or beta exploit or something. That would be good. I don't know. At this point, I'm just spitballing stuff. It's not really that important. But well, I haven't been back into Greyhack since I keep getting this weird bug here with loading. I'm sure it's probably something. I mean, it was just a major update. I'm working on some bugs. I'm not really upset about it or anything like that. But this is my last week before the semester kicks back in. I'm pretty busy with other work already. I don't really anticipate there being too much more time for Greyhack videos. I'm going to try to put some here and there, but since this is likely the last one for a little while, I did want to say for all of you who joined the channel because of the Greyhack videos, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. It is nice. I just put stuff out there generally for students. I started doing the Let's Play / hack series as fun since I was already playing the games, and I thought, hey, maybe there's some people out there who might be looking for a good hacking simulator and are doing research on a game or something before then, and maybe I could help somebody out with making their decision. And it's, I don't know, it's good to know that when you put something out there, it eventually finds its way to someone. There's still something in me from long ago when I was a kid and the internet first started becoming a thing during my teenage years. The idea that you could communicate in that fashion always seemed really cool to me. I don't know. I guess there's still something that seems really cool about that. And for me, it's almost like it's the fulfilling the destiny and the intent of the media in a fashion. So if I lose you, it'll be a while between uploads. That's fine. Just wanted to say thanks, express my gratitude for coming to watch. I'm nearing up on 200 subscribers, which is almost all gained over the summer, and almost all gained from Greyhack. I do want to give credit where it's due here. The creators of Greyhack I just want they've been really great about this is a great game. They've been great about updates. It seems like they're fixing bugs, and I don't know, it's just great. And the community seems great too. So that's it. Thanks again. And if you're around here with for future uploads or whatever I managed to cobble together while the semester is on, thank you for staying. If not, then I guess we'll welcome you back when you come back. All right, thanks.